Hello, welcome everyone. It's great to see you. Thank you so much for joining. It's great to see you at our Energize Your Classroom webinar series. We're delighted that you can join us. Please write on the chat with a hello where you're joining from. I'm Silvia Garastati, I'm the Head of Teacher Support for Language Cert, and we're here with our last webinar of 2025. And I want to wish you a wonderful festive season for those of you who are celebrating in December. Hello from Greece, hello to Turkey, to Athens, Cyprus, Pakistan. It's great to see you. We're very excited today to host the last version of our Energize Your Classroom, creating spaces for conversation. This time we wanted to place an emphasis on classrooms as spaces for conversations. It's been a three-part webinar series. It started in September with Teresa talking about classroom routines. Then Chantel talked about the modality of silence. And today we have Jade with us. Hello, Jade.
Hello, Sylvia. Hello, everyone.
And she will talk to us about student-generated visual. And before we go to Jane, I just wanted to open with the question that we started when we thought about the theme, when we thought about the topic. What if energizing your classroom is not about doing more? What if it's about communicating more effectively? And we wanted to think through simple but yet powerful approaches to communication, such as setting intentional routines, embracing meaningful silence, and using student-made visuals to spark creativity. We hope that these webinars, the series that you can now visit on YouTube, it's more than just a training session. It's an invitation to reflect, and it also shows our commitment to supporting teachers beyond testing and to creating spaces for real connection and for real learning. Thank you so much for writing in the chat. Hello to everyone, welcome. And we hope that you will find the series inspiring. You can watch all the speakers if you have missed some on the YouTube, and stay on the website because we're going to be announcing 2026. We've got great things coming up for our webinars. So we're here today with Jade, and she's an educational consultant. She's a trainer in using visuals for learning and integrating the life skills into the classroom. With Jane, we've been having wonderful conversations around art, but also drawing, creativity, and this is something that she's very passionate about, and I always get very, I'm going to use the word, energized by her creative approach to things. Whenever I go to a talk of hers, I always feel so inspired, and also that, I could be trying that in my classroom. So I think a lot of what I admire is how enabling she makes it. And we're going to see some of that today. Jade, thank you so much. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's fantastic to be here. And Sylvia, I think we go back maybe 10 years. We first started talking about using creative arts in the classroom when we first met. So it's really lovely to be here with Language Cert today to share some ideas and some insights. Great responses in the chats. We've got people from all over. We've got people from Croatia. I was in Croatia a couple of years ago, really beautiful. From Romania, from Jordan, from Italy. Hello to everybody. And thank you for joining us today. So good morning to some of you, good afternoon to some of you, good evening, I think, to some of you. I'm in mid Wales, so it's morning here. It's a little bit rainy outside, but it's nice and bright on the screen. So a little bit about me before we start. I'm a teacher and a teacher trainer and an educational consultant. And one of my main passions in education is using images, and especially drawing and creating visual content to engage learners and to support learning in the language classroom. So as you hopefully already know, today's session is about using student-made visuals to support communication and language learning. So we're going to start off by looking at the purpose of visual content. We're going to talk about the different things that we use it for. Then we'll move on and we'll talk about the benefits of student-made visuals, so visuals, images, drawings that are made by the students themselves as part of the learning process. And we'll talk about why they're valuable in the language classroom. And then finally, I'm going to share with you some practical classroom activities. So by the end of this session, you should have some ideas that you can take away and you can use in your own classrooms. It is an interactive session, so it's really great to see you typing in the chat box. I'm going to be asking you to share your experiences, share your ideas, share your responses. So please feel free to type in there. We are reading what you're writing, and it's lovely to have that dialogue going as well. So let's get started, and let's get started with a question for you. Your first question of the session. Here it is. In your classroom, what different types of visuals do you use in your lessons? What different types of visual content do you use in your lessons generally? Okay, so we've got Ivana straight in there, photos, videos. Somebody's put animation, fantastic. We've got posters, pictures, flashcards, fantastic. Lots of things coming in, videos, commercials as well. Yeah, videos too. So yeah, lots of people saying photos. Anything else? Anything different? Videos, photos, flashcards, what else? Kinesthetic exercises, that's interesting. I'd like to hear more about that later. Drawings, fantastic. Graphs, Raquel, nice. Okay, so really common in, particularly in exam classes, often students have to talk about graphs and diagrams. We've got storyboards, graffiti, that's nice. I use street art quite a lot with my students. Gestures, of course, that's another type of visual content too. So I did have an example with you while I was for you while I was waiting for you to respond, but you're so quick, we don't need it. But I'll tell you anyway. So one of the students that I'm working with at the moment, she's based in Sweden, and she needs to explain different concepts about leadership and team building to her clients. So to help her do this in English, I ask her to create and to share diagrams during our lessons to explain those concepts and how different things connect together. So diagrams is a good example of a type of visual that we use in our lessons together. And we've got realia as well. Absolutely, we'll see a little something kinesthetic and realia based later on. So thank you for sharing your ideas and your experiences. And as we can see from these, there are lots of different types of visuals. We're not just talking about photos and videos. So you can see on the slide here, of course, we do use photographs a lot. We use videos nowadays with our students in our lessons. But we also use paintings, maybe drawings, comics, graphic novels are particularly useful with younger learners. We use emojis too. Did anyone type emojis? So in messaging and online platforms, we often see emojis, and sometimes we have these in our lessons too. And then we've got maps and other types of diagrams. Frederic has written Google Maps, absolutely. So timelines are a good example of diagrams that we might use. We've also got infographics, presentation slides, of course, really useful for students in higher education and going into work contexts. And then we've also got online visual media, so things like memes and GIFs might come up as well. Yes, somebody did mention emojis, Diora, thank you. So there are lots of different types or formats of visuals. And a lot of these different formats are multimodal, so they combine different modes of communication, such as text, sound, or image. If you think about videos and infographics, for example, it's not just an image, but we're combining different modes of communication. Letitia says she does a lot of drawing on the board. Fantastic. I do quite a lot of drawing on the board too. I find it really useful for students. Okay, so visuals serve lots of different purposes. So they communicate different things and they impact the viewer, the person looking at them, in different ways. So we're just going to spend a couple of minutes having a look at this in a little bit more detail. I'm going to show you an image now on the next slide. And I'd like you to have a look at this and think about what is the main purpose or objective of the visual here? What is it doing? What is it for? What function does it serve? And I'd like you to share your answers in the chat box. So Frederic has written focus straight away, photosynthesis. Okay, explanatory explanation. Here we go. Jane has written it goes from something general to more detail. That's nice. To convey meaning. Angela, to illustrate scientific words. To show the growth of the plants. Fantastic. You're good at this. Introducing new vocabulary, maybe. Comparison. Improving the recall ability of students. Muskan. Interesting. Yeah, we're going to come to recall a little bit later. Help students understand the meaning better. So creating a connection between theory and the real world. Lovely. Okay, thank you. Well, you are absolutely right. The main purpose of this visual is to explain the key components, in this case of a plant. So this might be for educational use in botany or plant morphology. Maybe it could be used as a scientific explanation to accompany texts or field guides. It could be used for reference, for plant identification and classification. So this is an informative diagram used to convey the structure of something clearly and accurately. Now, I would like you to imagine that all of the information that is communicated through this illustration and diagram is explained using only text, with no pictures, no images, no illustrations, just text. But it communicates the same information. So what would we need? We would need a written description of what the leaves look like, what the flower looks like, or the different parts of the flower. We would need some kind of description of the size and scale of the different parts of the plant and how they relate to each other. So we'd need quite a lot of information. It might look something like this. You don't need to read this text, but you can see the difference here between how quickly the visual communicates information compared with the same information presented in written text. So the text is linear, it's static, it's much harder to process, but the diagram is immediately more engaging and it creates a shortcut to understanding. It's much quicker at conveying information. And somebody says, yeah, the text might seem boring, it's not as engaging, it doesn't grab our attention in the same way that the image does. So when we're using visuals, we're communicating information much more quickly. And research actually shows that the brain processes images 60,000 times faster than we process text. 60,000 times faster. So this demonstrates just how valuable visuals are in learning. And as Gunnar says, a picture speaks 1,000 words, maybe more. Okay, I'm going to show you another image now. It's the same question, different image. What is the main purpose or objective of the visual shown here? What function does it serve? What is it for? Let's get your answers in the chat box for this one. Okay, so Ivana, to motivate students to talk about something, maybe. Arena as a lead-in. Okay, so you're going straight into classroom thinking, which is fantastic, and it shows that you're quite experienced teachers. But let's think about, just take the classroom out of it. What is the visual for? What is it doing? So Frederic says colors, nature, showing something scientific through artwork. So that's an interesting word, artwork. That's quite relevant here, I think. Could be promotional. So, okay, Elka says beauty. That's interesting. To stimulate ideas and thoughts, introducing art, enabling you to recognize the plant in the wild, maybe. Abstract art. Okay, Eva, to convey some kind of subjective perception of reality like it is in art. That's really interesting. Okay, so thank you for contributing. Of course, the purpose of this visual is creative or artistic expression rather than scientific explanation. So it focuses on a kind of aesthetic appreciation of the plant and its bold shapes and vibrant colors. And it might also have some kind of emotional visual impact, so emphasizing form, color, contrast, and composition. And maybe it's aiming to highlight the beauty of tropical flora in a dramatic or a symbolic way. And somebody says this image makes me feel tingly. That's really nice. So you're having an emotional response to this image in the way that you didn't to the diagram on the previous slide. So this painting is by Georgia O'Keeffe. She painted this in 1939 when she accepted a commission from a New York advertising firm to travel to the Hawaiian Islands and to paint scenes for a pineapple juice promotional campaign. But as well as being a commercial job, the work was also an art project for her, and this is one of the paintings that she did during that time. So what we have here is two very broad categories illustrating the different purposes of visuals. So we've got painting, providing enjoyment or provoking some kind of emotional response, maybe to deepen our understanding of ourselves or the world around us, perhaps. And Slavenka says she felt the promotional element in there. That's quite interesting. And then we have the diagram. So this is providing information or illustrating or explaining something. So we've got providing enjoyment and providing information. And these two categories often overlap, particularly in promotions and advertising. So when we think about adverts, for example, they're often designed to be both aesthetically pleasing in some way, so as to draw us in as the viewer or appeal to our emotions, but also to provide information about a product or a service. I'll give you a moment just to read what's on the slide here. So this example, the image here is from an advertisement for this Hawaiian pineapple juice, and this is by Miguel Caruvias. Okay, so when we think about the visuals that we use in class, this is true in learning too, that we have aesthetically pleasing, engaging visuals, and we have informative visuals. So maybe we might use photographs or drawings to explain or illustrate vocabulary, or diagrams to explain a process. We might use videos and artworks to increase engagement, to motivate students or promote discussion about something. Maybe we use timelines to focus attention on a particular idea or concept when we're explaining tense and aspect, for example. And by providing visual as well as verbal input, we also facilitate memory. So we help to create stronger links in the brain for students to remember what they're learning. But I'd like to just look briefly at the link between images and words. I have a really exciting question for you now. You don't need to type your answer in the chat box because we are going to have a poll in a moment. But this is your question. Just take a look at these shapes here. The question will be, which of these shapes is Kiki and which one is Booba? So each of them has a name, and your question will be, which is which? So you have option 1, Kiki, is the sharp shape on the left. We've got the poll running now, so feel free put your answers in the poll. So option 1, Kiki on the left and Booba on the right, or option 2, Booba on the left and Kiki on the right. Hopefully you can see those on the screen there too. So we've got lots of answers coming in here, and it's quite interesting to see the results as they're coming in. And somebody's put in the chat box as well, a couple of things there. This is very interesting. Which one is Kiki and which one is Booba? Okay, so let's end the poll and get the results on the screen there. Okay, so we've got 86% of you chose option 1, Kiki, as the kind of sharp, jagged, spiky shape, and 14% of you said option 2. And I know we've got a few more in the chat as well. So Slavenka says Booba suggests a bubble. Somebody else has put that they meant to say 1, but they chose option 2. So I think we're definitely in favor of option 1, aren't we? So this experiment, this is really interesting. It's been carried out countless times and with similar results. So it was first observed by a German-American psychologist called Wolfgang Kohler in 1929. So that's quite a long time ago. So in psychological experiments first conducted on the island of Tenerife, where the primary language is Spanish, the 95 to 98% of people selected the curvy bubble-like shape as Booba and the jagged spiky shape as Kiki. So what this suggests is that the human brain somehow attaches abstract meanings to shapes and sounds in a consistent way. So word and image are intrinsically linked. Instinctively, we're finding or creating patterns between shape and sound. So neuroscience has shown that a visualization plays a really dominant role in our thinking. So half of the nerve fibers in the brain are dedicated to vision. And when our eyes are open, visual activity makes up 2/3 of the brain's electrical signals. So this means that when we use visuals in learning in the classroom, we greatly enhance our students' ability to engage with and comprehend and process and retain information. But of course, today we're not just talking about visuals, we're talking about student-made visuals. We know there are lots of different types of visuals and they serve different purposes, and we know that visual content is beneficial for learning. But let's look now at the benefits of student-made visuals, so visuals made by the students themselves as part of the lesson. So this is a little bit more of a challenging question. How is drawing different from just looking at an image? Let's get your answers in the chat box. Let's get some of your ideas here. How are these two things different? Okay, we've got answers coming in straight away. Engaging. Raquel, makes you move physically. That's interesting. Requires more brain processing. We've got active learning, personal interpretation. That's nice. It's more interactive, activates creativity. Viewing versus representing, multimodal skills. Interesting. Information is more effectively absorbed using a tactile sense. Okay, great. You've got a really good grasp on this. This is fantastic. I'm going to just talk about this a little bit. So the visual cortex is the part of the brain that helps us to process things like shapes and colors and depth and movement. And when we look at an image, our visual cortex becomes highly active. But when we draw something, usually we kind of start by imagining or visualizing what we want to create. And this mental picture in our minds activates parts of the visual cortex that overlap with the areas that we use when we're just looking at something. So even without any input from our eyes, the brain reuses these visual pathways to picture or to visualize the image. And we know from research that visualization can be really beneficial for language learning. So it has been shown to facilitate comprehension, the basic understanding of information, interpretation, so things like analyzing and explaining. It facilitates positive engagement, so it's actively and thoughtfully engaging with what you're reading. Retention, storing information in the memory over time. And as somebody said earlier, recall, so retrieving that information that you've stored when you need it. So this is visualization. This is just the picture that we create in our minds. But then we go further, of course, and we use our hands to help us create something. So we go from visualizing to actually drawing. So as well as using the visual cortex to help create and manipulate the pictures in your mind, the mental images, when we draw, the brain also adds in motor control, telling your hand how to move, spatial reasoning, so that's figuring out how different parts fit together, like size and distance and position. Sustained attention, so staying focused for longer periods of time. Memory, using what we already know about how things look. And of course, imagination, picturing things in our mind or inventing new ideas. So when we draw or create an image, we're engaging more parts of the brain. And this leads to a deeper interaction with the subject, and it creates a stronger, longer lasting memory connection. So in short, drawing helps the brain to remember. And there have been lots of studies into this. So for example, the Department of Psychology at the University of Waterloo carried out a study in 2016 into drawing information as a strategy to enhance memory. And they found that we can recall twice as many drawn words as written words. And that's regardless of artistic skill. So this is not about being an accomplished artist. Okay, so as we've seen, there are lots of benefits to integrating drawing activities into our lessons. There's all of this activity going on in the brain as we're doing that. But let's have a look at some practical ways that we can do that. I'm going to share a few different activities with you, but I think something really important to remember here is that these types of tasks are really flexible. There are countless different ways that we can use student-made visuals in the English language classroom. So I would really encourage you to be creative, to use your imagination and to experiment with different ideas. But let me share some starting points with you now. So the first activity that I'd like to tell you about, this is called story scenes. And you can use this when you're reading a story in class, or when you're reading a text, or when you're listening to something. It also works with dialogue, so it's not just limited to stories. And what happens is that students work together in pairs or small groups, and they simply draw a scene from a story or a listening text. And the example that I have on the slide here, this is a group of upper intermediate students were reading a story by Roald Dahl called Taste. And this is their capture of one of the scenes in that story. And then they come back together and they explain their drawing to the class or to a different partner. And I really like this activity because it really helps students get to grips with what's happening at any particular moment in a story or a listening text. So it helps them to feel invested in what's happening. And in order to do the activity, they're motivated to keep reading and rereading the text or listening and re-listening to understand what might be in their scene. And of course, depending on the text, there are some different language focus opportunities here as well. So with stories, you might focus on past tenses or sequencing words, narrative structures, when students are explaining their scene to a different partner or to the group. So this is story scenes. I use this quite a lot and it's very popular with students. So this is stories, but let's have a look at something a little bit more grammar focused now. So this is conditional roads, and I use this activity to help students understand the third conditional, because that can be quite tricky for us to get our heads around. And I encourage them to relate it to their own experience, to their own lives. So students begin by drawing a road, and that road represents their life journey. And along that road, they then draw important events, so significant things that have happened or that they've done in their lives so far. And then you can see on the illustration here, there are some roads in red coming off at the sides. So these are the next roads that they draw, but these are the roads that they didn't take, the things they didn't do. And then they draw what might have happened if they'd taken a different path. So, for example, if we hadn't moved to a smaller village, then we wouldn't have bought a house. Or if I had moved to San Francisco, then I wouldn't have met my husband. And students really like this activity because it gives them something concrete to support their understanding of the third conditional. But it also acts as a kind of launch pad for communicating their ideas with other people. And of course, they have something they can take away at the end of the lesson to remind them of the language and the concept, not in an abstract way, but actually in relation to their own lives. So it's relevant and it's personalized. It's a lovely activity. Okay, let's have a look at something else now. So this is called process diagrams. This is a really versatile activity because you can use it with any type of process. So that could be describing your morning routine or making a piece of toast. It could really be any kind of process at all. And when we look at the world around us, there are so many processes going on. So what happens during this activity is that students draw a diagram, they make step notes about the steps involved in the process, and then they use those drawings to explain that process to a partner. So you might focus on sequencing words, you might focus on passive structures, it depends on the process. And while they're doing this activity, students are thinking about how they will explain each step in words. And then the drawing provides a kind of anchor from which they can describe that process to somebody else. Okay, some great comments in the chat box. Thank you. Yeah, these are really engaging. It's just kind of making things, giving students a grounding from which to communicate and helping them to remember. And it gives them processing time as well. I think that's really important. Time to think about what they want to say and how they're going to say it. Okay, we're going to have a look at another activity now. And I'm going to ask Sylvia. Sylvia, how are you? Are you all right?
Yeah, I'm really enjoying.
Great.
I love the third conditionals activity.
Oh,
Really enjoying that.
it's great, isn't it? Because it's so personalized as well,
Yeah.
so individual. It's lovely. This next activity, I'm going to explain how it works, but I'm going to ask you to do the activity as I'm explaining it, if that's okay. So do you have a pen and paper in front of you there? Fantastic. Okay, so while I'm doing the activity, I would like you to think about and draw your top 3 favorites, let's say, activities. So this activity, this is called Sketch and Explain, and it works with anything really. I've chosen activities here, and that's the example that I have on the slide, and Sylvia's going to do her own example for us. But this could be their top 3 favorite foods, books, places, movies, animals, anything you like that's kind of relevant to the topic. So it's really flexible, and it's about students' own interests and preferences. And this works really well as a kind of lead in or a warm up at the start of a lesson, or just to close the lesson as well. So students draw their activities and then they explain their choices and discuss them with a partner. So Sylvia, if you give me a thumbs up when you're ready. No hurry, you're all right.
Yeah, I'm kind of ready. Yeah.
You're ready, great. Okay, would you like to hold up your paper and share with us your top 3 favorite activities that you've drawn?
Well, let's see. The background doesn't make it easy, I guess, but maybe here.
Okay, great. Can you tell
So,
me what you've drawn there? Tell me a little bit about what you've put on the paper.
so this is one of the things that I do and I love doing is yoga. So this is sort of meditation position here to visualize that. And here I love reading. So this is something that is a really big part of my life. So these are just two books here to represent that. And I also recently started a painting class.
Yay.
So although I can't draw quite well, I love paint. And this is just a representation of that in a like little landscape there as well.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Some nice examples of giving reasons there. Can I just ask you, which of those three activities do you prefer?
Me,
If you had to choose one, which one do you like the most?
reading.
Why?
I don't know, reading is my life. It just, this is where I live.
How would you compare reading with doing yoga, for example? How are they different? Is one of them...
Yeah, I mean, you're engaging with ideas, you're engaging with other worlds. It's about engaging with another kind of domain, whether it's an intellectual domain, a sentimental domain. Whereas, when in a yoga practice, you're somehow asked to kind of look within and just engage with nothing, ideally, or with your own resistance to that nothing.
Lovely. Thank you so much for sharing those with us. That's fantastic. Thank you, Sylvia. So, as you can see, there are lots of opportunities for different language focuses here. So this could be about giving opinions or comparing things, justifying. Sylvia was really good at justifying, kind of getting into the nitty-gritty of why something is a pleasure for her. And by drawing their ideas and preferences, students are engaging creatively in the task. So this is making the language more personalized and more memorable because it's rooted in a concrete example that they haven't just pictured in their minds, but they've also created a visual representation of. Okay, let's move on and have a look at another activity now. So this is called a picture dictation. And it works like a running dictation. So students work together in pairs. And in those pairs, we have a listener and a speaker. Now, in my classroom, I usually set this up by placing the image at the front of the class away from the students. And then I have one student from each pair come up, have a look at the image, and then allow them to go back and forth. But you can also copy the image and distribute it to one person in each pair. So what happens is that the speaker in each pair describes the image to their partner, and their partner then listens and tries to draw the scene from the description. And you can put a time limit on this to kind of motivate students and make it a bit of a race if you want to. And then once they've done their drawings, then they compare them with the original and with each other's and discuss the differences. So there's some really great communication going on here as students try to explain and understand what's going on in the image. And during the activity, I encourage them to ask questions as well. And of course, the language focus here might be on describing shapes and objects or prepositions or generally just listening comprehension. This is really good for. So the examples that we've looked at so far, they all involve drawing. But of course, as we know, there are lots of different types of visuals. So we're going to have a look at a few ideas for helping students use different types of visual content. So I'm going to share another few activities with you now. This one is infographics, so you'll be familiar with infographics. There are lots of really good online infographic makers that you can use for free. So you'll find lots of sites that provide really easy to use templates. So with this one, again, it's really versatile. You can use any topic. Students do their research, they decide what they want to say and communicate about that topic. And then they use images and icons and short phrases or statistics to create their infographic poster. And then they present their infographic to the group, explaining the main points that they've got there. So the language focus here could be about describing data, maybe making comparisons, giving examples, but it will be very grounded in the topic that you're doing. So have a think about what topic you're focusing on with your students this week and next week. And maybe there's an opportunity there to get them creating infographics. Okay, I'm going to share one more activity with you now. This one's a little bit different. So a little earlier in the session, somebody mentioned sort of tactile, handheld, maybe realia. This is kind of connected to that. So this is more of a sort of 3D type visual. These little blocks, I've got, let me see if I can hold this set up. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see this. There we are. So these are called Cuisenaire rods. You can get these quite easily online. They're not too expensive. These are kind of the old school wooden ones, but you can get plastic ones as well. I really recommend them. I absolutely love them. They were originally designed as a kind of maths learning tool, but they're fantastic for English language teaching. They can be used in so many ways, and I wish we had time to look at all of those ways today. But so in this activity, this example that I've got on the slide here, students use the Cuisenaire rods to build a map of their actual or their ideal town or home or school. In this example on the screen, students have built a map of their ideal town or city, and then they present and explain their model to the class. So the language, of course, will be focused around what they've built. So it might be places that you might see in a city, but describing places and locations and giving reasons as well. So Cuisenaire rods, this is a really lovely activity. So we've had a look at a few different things here. These are just examples of a few activities that you can use with your students. But of course, one of the fantastic things about this approach is its flexibility. There are so many different ways we can use student-made visuals. So I really encourage you to be creative and try out different ideas. We are coming to the end of the session shortly. So if you have a particular topic that you're working on with your class, and maybe you need some inspiration, feel free to type a question for us in the Q&A. And if we have enough time, we'll try and discuss some possible ideas for you. I'm sure Sylvia and I can come up with some exciting ideas. But before we just move on, I just ask you, looking at the activities here on the screen, which of these can you see yourself using in your classroom with your students? Which of these activities particularly resonates with you that you think would be useful for your context? So just type in the chat box which activities you might use. So somebody's got a sketch and explain. Yeah, it's so adaptable. You can use it really with anything. Most of them, that's great. Conditional roads, yeah, I love that. I love that activity. That was shared with me by a colleague many years ago, and I've used it lots of times. Always works really well. Process diagrams, again, really flexible. Sketch and explain, lovely. And photo stories too. Yeah, these are fantastic. Okay. Sylvia, can I just bring you back in for a moment? If you're there, lovely. Did we look at photo stories?
No, we didn't. I was
I
wondering
think
about
we
that.
might have skipped the slide. I think we've got a couple of minutes. Let's go
Yeah,
back
please. Yes,
and
let's
have a
go.
look
Let's
at
go and
photo
look at that.
stories. So a bit of a technical hiccup at this end. We've missed out photo stories. Thank you, Jane. Let's have a look at photo stories. Hopefully you can see that on your screen now. These are great. So not drawing, not infographics, but taking photos. It's really straightforward. It's really simple. Students create a photo story with 4 to 6 panels showing a short story or a dialogue. So you might focus on narrative structures when students tell their story, but what's really lovely again is you can use it relating to any topic or language point that you want to practice. So in the example on the screen here, students were learning about idiomatic expressions. And they're actually surprisingly easy to make. So I do these with my students using a simple Word program, and then they just drag and drop, they paste their photographs into that document, and add any dialogue or captions in text boxes or in speech bubble shapes. So this is photo stories. Sorry for missing that, but you didn't miss out. Lovely. Okay, so these are the different activities that we've looked at. And I'd just like to share with you now some key takeaways, just to highlight these things worth remembering. So student-made visuals support communication. They help students to organize their ideas and prepare what they want to say. They also promote deeper understanding. So they provide another route into comprehension so that students can really get to grips with what they're learning. And they foster active participation in the learning process. They're engaging the brain in lots of different ways, different to just receiving input. And of course, student-made visuals are flexible, so be creative and experiment. And I'd like to just end with this quote. Have a look at this. I think this summarizes the benefit of student-made visuals quite nicely. But of course, this isn't just limited to drawing, but that could also be using different types of visuals, Cuisenaire, Realia, those kind of things as well. I have a few references here for you if you want to do a bit of further reading, if this is something that you want to look at, and these are also references that I've used in the slides here. And the image at the bottom of the screen here, this is a drawing that a student of mine did when they were talking about how things develop and how things grow. And I thought it was quite suited to this session because it's about growing our ideas and our creativity as teachers and as learners as well. So I would just like to say a huge thank you to all of you. Your contributions in the chat box have been fantastic. It's been absolutely wonderful. I'm going to bring Sylvia back. Hi, Sylvia.
Thank you, Jade.
Have some time for questions, I think.
We do, yeah, we've got plenty of time for questions. And what a lovely way to end with that drawing of the kind of growth of the seed that then becomes this wonderful blossoming apple tree, perhaps. And the reading, Tomlinson, I've been reading with, he talks so well about visualization. And you talked about that, this idea of just, and how it helps language learning. Now, we're waiting for questions in the chat. And there's a question from Angela about any apps that you would recommend to create bubbles in photo stories. So this is more of a practical question, I guess, for what kind of digital applications could help us with that. I think a lot of
That's a really good question. I am not at liberty to recommend specific tools, to name and recommend specific tools over others. But I will say that the kind of word program and presentation programs that I have on my computer that most of you will be familiar with are really easy to use because they usually have a shape function. So you can add in shapes and you can make those shapes like bubbles or speech bubbles, captions, boxes. Kiki and Booba was made within a Word program or let's say a presentation slide program. You all know what I'm talking about, but I won't name them. But there are, I mean, in terms of tools, there are lots. If you just search in a browser for things like free infographic generator or free infographic maker, you'll find websites that students can use, and they offer templates that students can create things within as well. So it doesn't have to be really fancy tech that you have to register lots of things and so on. It's yeah, keep it simple would be my advice.
That's important. And there was a question about adapting these for online classes. At some point in the chat, and I'm, a lot of these could work very well in a classroom. Do they? Could you use them while teaching online? How would you adapt them?
Yes, absolutely. You very easily use them while teaching online, as you demonstrated very nicely, Sylvia, I have to say, by holding up your picture that you'd drawn and talking about that. So students can create their visuals, let's say analog in front of them on paper, and then share them on the screen, of course. But I like to use a digital whiteboard. There are some really good free digital whiteboards out there. And that enables students to just drop their images, photos, drawings within that document, and then they can zoom in and see them and see each other's work on the screen while they're talking about it. And depending on how you run your online lessons as well, it might be that you give students an opportunity to create something or to draw something, and then to, outside of the lesson, record themselves speaking about it. And to share that recording in an online digital portfolio, for example, to share that audio file. So there are lots of different ways that you can adapt these for online. Absolutely.
Now, as we were thinking about this, you mentioned quite a bit of times about tactile, about this bringing in the body. And I wondered from your experience, because you have been working with students on that, do you see them reacting differently when you start inviting them to, obviously your students are used to that, but can you share a little bit just with the participants here, what are students' reactions when they start getting used to the process?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it very much depends on the class and it very much depends on the students. I think one of the things that I learned this quite early on, and I learned it the hard way. I'm okay at drawing. I'm not trained as an artist, but I'm okay. I'm not bad. You know, I can draw a little picture and you can kind of recognize what it is. I learned quite quickly not to do really good drawings on the whiteboard. Because if I do really good drawings, that's intimidating for students. Certainly, if I'm in a class and I've been, you know, in German lessons myself, if the teacher draws something and I think it's really good, it makes me afraid to draw. So I think my first piece of advice there would be to model that it's okay for it to just be a kind of rough and ready sketch. It doesn't have to be brilliant. Also, when we think about the reasons that students are creating these drawings, they're not they're not creating them to put into a picture dictionary as an instantly recognizable thing. They're creating them for themselves to support their own communication and as part of their own learning journey. So if they have drawn it, they will know what it is, even if nobody else recognizes it. So I talk about that sometimes with my students. Um, the other thing I find really useful is mini whiteboards. I've got some up there, but I won't disappear and get them. But mini whiteboards, they're usually, you can get them in A5 or A4 size. They're not hugely expensive. If you're working in an institution, I would ask you to encourage your director of studies or your principal to order some. They're fantastic with little whiteboard pens, and then students can use those in class. And they are slightly less intimidating, I think, because they're less committed. They're less committed to something, so they can rub stuff out if they're not happy with it. And they work really well. And like Cuisenaire rods, they're really versatile. You can use them in lots of different ways too. So it's about familiarizing students with the process. I think in the beginning, people can be a little bit like, oh, suddenly having to draw something. But once they've done it once, they A, recognize the value of it, and B, they really enjoy it because it's different and it's asking something of them and it makes learning personalized. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got a couple more questions. We've got a couple of minutes, so this is great to be able to receive questions from the participants. Thank you so much in the Q&A or in the chat. Now, you've mentioned a lot of ways how, through the activities, how they could be then speaking about the drawings. There is a question about how do we incorporate that into a lesson plan? So is it something, can you talk to us a little bit about a framework or a sequencing? Does it happen in a lead-in? I mean, I'm sure it go in a lot of moments in a lesson, but talk to us a little bit about how do you incorporate that into a lesson?
Yeah, I mean, it does depend on the activity, but it also depends on your lesson. Some of these activities lend themselves better to a kind of lead-in or an end of lesson activity. So things like sketch and explain, for example. If you are, if you're exploring the topic of sport, then you might start your lesson by asking students to just think for themselves about their three favorite sports and then to draw these. And then this is the beginning of the lesson. And it also works quite nice as a sort of closing speaking activity. But things like, so conditional roads is a good example of something that is it's the foundation for the lesson. So when I use that activity, usually I start with that. So I give students, nice big piece of paper, blank piece of paper and some pens, and I model on the board. I begin just by drawing that central road that goes across from one side of the paper to the other. And I explain that this road represents my life. And I'll put a few little drawings along to mark significant points. And then I ask them to do the same thing. And then once they've done that, I'll go back to the board and draw the red roads to say, okay, so these are the paths that I didn't take in my life. And I get them to draw those. And then once they've done that, I start to elicit from them, okay, did this happen? Yes, no, why not? How do we know it? It's the red road, it didn't happen. Okay, so what would be the impact of that if that had happened? And I'll start to elicit from them third conditionals. They work for mixed conditionals as well with higher levels. And I'll get some examples on the board. And then I'll ask them to look at their own drawings and to think about, the results, the causes and results, and to put those into sentences or make notes about those things on their drawings before they talk about them. So it's step by step. It's setting up the environment in which students need the language, and then you're providing the language for them. So it works really well. What other activities? So yeah, I mean, photo stories might be, I might use that for practicing language. So after students have learned new language, new vocabulary from some kind of input text or authentic context, then that would be more of a practice activity, I think, for reusing, recycling that language within a context that they're deciding. And a lot of those are sort of, practicing language activities.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're so welcome.
Okay, I think we've got a few more just slides to talk a little bit about what LanguageCert is doing has been offering for teachers. And in the next slide, I wanted to remind you that we've got new teacher guides for ESOL for Schools for A1 to B2 level for all 4 skills, where you will be able to see activities related to our exam tasks. This is something that has been newly prepared and newly uploaded for all our teaching community with classroom-ready teaching sequences. And now we can think about the next installation where we've got a little bit of drawing. And we've got the YouTube series that you can explore on the recording will be available there. And I think this is it from us at LanguageCert Jade. It was lovely to have you here with us and get inspired by these ideas. Thank you so much. And we are going to be leaving you with a little survey at the end. You will receive a certificate of participation next week, and the webinar recording will be uploaded on YouTube. So this is it from us. Thank you so much, Jade.
Thank you so much, Sylvia, and thank you everybody for all your fantastic contributions.
All right. So stay tuned for 2026. Have a great festive season and enjoy the break. And we'll be with you back in the new year with more professional development from LanguageCert, helping teachers and supporting them for testing and beyond testing. All right. Bye-bye, everyone.